Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of ExecuNet Masterclass. I'm your host, Tony Vlahos, and my guest this hour is Columbia Business School professor and globally recognized strategy expert, Rita Gunther-McGrath. So for the longest time, the sort of holy grail of strategy has been this thing known as the, quote, sustainable competitive advantage. Sounds familiar, right? Truth is, a lot of what we know about strategy is misplaced, and these days, sticking to the old way of thinking can actually even be dangerous. Professor McGrath advocates for a more modern strategy she deems transient advantage. And today she's going to tell us about it and what we need to do to seize opportunities, compete, and win. Pretty important stuff, and part of our commitment here at ExecuNet to connect you with higher value thinking that can elevate your business and career. And I want to add to that a special thanks today to our friends at Columbia Business School Executive Education for helping to make today possible for all of you. It's a real pleasure to be connected with them. So let's begin at the beginning with a few housekeeping things that will make your experience today all the more enjoyable and valuable. First, by now you should have received the slide deck for today's presentation. Yes, many of you are nodding, I can tell, so I'm going to say yes. If you are certain you have not, then please chat in your name and email, and my amazing colleague Kim will send it to you right away. Second, if you'd like to ask Rita questions today, and I certainly encourage you to do that, please chat those in, and I'll do my best to relay as many as possible to her at the end of the presentation. Lastly, very important, please complete your evaluation before you leave. Our presenter values your feedback, and we do too. It really does help us serve you better. So I am really happy to introduce today's presenter. Rita Gunther-McGrath is regarded as one of the world's top experts on strategy and innovation, with particular emphasis on developing sound strategy in uncertain and volatile environments. Thinkers 50 presented Rita with the #1 award for strategy, the Distinguished Achievement Award, in 2013, and she remains in their top 10 global list of management thinkers overall. Rita has been recognized as one of the top 10 business school professors to follow on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter and not doing that, you should totally do that. And she was named one of the 25 smartest women to follow on Twitter by Fast Company magazine. Of course, she's the author of the bestseller, The End of Competitive Advantage, How to Keep Your Strategy Moving as Fast as Your Business. And that book was recognized by Strategy and Business as the #1 business book of the year. She is also teaching a program at Columbia. I think it's the 3rd week of May. It's called Leading Strategic Growth and Change. It's a 5-day program, and it's focused on the process of finding opportunities, launching new ventures, and leading necessary changes to revitalize your organization. So a little later on in our program, Kim is going to chat out a link for you to access some free information about it. I'll say check it out. It could make all the difference in your business going forward. So with that, welcome Rita to the ExecuNet stage. They are all yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you very kindly for being my hosts. I'm looking forward to the session. The next 40 minutes or so, what I'd like to share with you is some observations from my own work, as well as work that other people have been doing, looking at what we've come to start calling the transient advantage economy. And as you suggested when we opened up, Tony, that we used to think of sustainable competitive advantage as the holy grail. And the idea was you would find an opportunity, throw up entry barriers like crazy, and then you'd have that advantage to enjoy for a long time. And what we're finding is that in more and more parts of our economy, that just doesn't reflect reality anymore. And instead what we have is a quite different pattern of advantage. And as a consequence, many of the practices and the management approaches that we've relied on over time just don't work because they don't attend to as much of the whole life cycle of a competitive advantage as we really need them to. So what we're really dealing with here is what I call the transient advantage economy. And you've got logos here of a number of firms that have bumped up against this or are struggling in some way. HTC some years ago could do absolutely no wrong. Everybody said, oh, this is a model company, and today they're struggling a bit. Target famously has not only had problems with its computers and security systems, but has kind of lost touch with its customers. Radio Shack struggling with bankruptcy. They're actually going to be closing down a lot of those shops, and even really well-established firms like Intel and Procter & Gamble struggle when the economy changes and things are managed differently. So this is a concept that I think has become very well entrenched into what we're looking at in the world. So if you think of what a competitive advantage kind of looks like over time, I would argue that advantages begin with some kind of insight, something that you see first or best or more completely than other firms do. And from that insight, that idea, you have a process of beginning to capitalize on that idea. So you incubate the business, and then if you're fortunate, you ramp it up, you bring it up to scale. And then if you have a good impact on the market, you have a period of exploitation where people get to everything's clicking, you're making money, competitors are at a disadvantage, you're creating a category or you're gaining more customers, and life is good, and this is wonderful. But, in open competitive markets, what happens next is that competitors will copy, people will attempt to match you, and more than that, even customers get bored. It's what have you done for me lately, and where's what's next, what's new, what's the hot new thing. And so what you can predict is that your advantage is going to come under pressure. You don't necessarily know that it's going to go away, but you can predict that you're going to have to do something to keep it fresh and extend it for as long a period of time as you possibly can. Then that's something to consider, because that's the kind of behavior that gives you, low-fat, caffeine-free, guaranteed organic Coca-Cola, right? It's the next thing that preserves a particular franchise. So let's say that you can't extend the advantage anymore. You've come to the conclusion that eventually it's going to be fading away, and the advantage then goes into erosion. And what the task is at that point is to take resources out of exhausted advantages and repurpose them so that you've got your next generation insight, your next generation new thing that you're doing. And so in a transient advantage world, the role of continually creating these pipelines of advantage becomes increasingly important, and something that companies really need to get much, much better at. And yet what you find is that that's a real struggle. Creating these pipelines of competitive advantage.
Yeah. So let's start with the flops file. This has caught the attention of quite a few of our friends on the call today, and I'm gonna take the questions I've received and kind of frame them into a fill in the blank, if you will, Rita. So there's a spot reserved in my flops file for blank company, unless they blank. Can you shed some light on who we'd put in the blanks and why?
Who we would put in what companies do we think are in trouble?
Yes, and unless they change something dramatically soon.
Well, I would actually start with a startup that I think is likely to have problems. It's called Jet.com. And it's founded by the guys who started Diapers.com, which got sold off to Amazon for about $550 million. But here's the thing, their first startup, they delivered diapers to their neighbors, and they stored them in a friend's garage, and they literally bought them from Costco and got paid for delivering them, and it was a very, very frugal startup. Today, Jet.com employs over 100 people. They have this interesting idea about new business models that they're trying to develop, but they But there's a huge amount of money going into this thing right off the bat, and it's a classic second-time around entrepreneur dilemma, which is, they're ambitious, they want to get big very fast, they want to put a lot of money into marketing, and my research suggests that tends to be a bad way to go, because what ends up happening is all that money being burnt sort of pushes you in a negative direction. So I think that's kind of a problem, and so that's an example of a company that I would want to see them doing more learning and more testing before spending that kind of money up front.
Okay. So, Rita, you made certainly true, compelling statements about individual careers and talent. Could you address for us what the implications are for corporate culture? Because many of us look at corporate culture as a real competitive advantage. Is there an implication for that value and that differentiator when people are kind of changing companies and gigs rather rapidly and frequently?
Yeah, I think well, two things. My research suggests that companies that are really good at doing this have this fascinating balance between stability on the one hand and dynamism on the other. And one of the forces for stability is indeed, as you point out, corporate culture. And so what I think you're going to see is companies evolving.